Julian from WSOU 89.5 FM here with Ben Majoy, the man behind keyboards, synths, and programming from Melted Bodies. How are we doing?
Thriving, man. That was a very nice intro. I love that. Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here. You guys have
Awesome.
always been really, really kind to Melted Bodies, so this is always a treat talking to you guys.
That's great. Great. Well, let's get into it. You guys have been pretty busy lately playing shows, releasing volume one and two of The Inevitable Fork with more music on the way. How does it feel?
It's been good, man. We've been we had a sick run of shows with our friends Flagman and Sump earlier this year, and we're pretty slow on releasing stuff, partly because we're just all very detail oriented. So we've been literally just listening to the new mixes for the rest of the record like the last couple days. So we're really psyched to get them out. And that was one of the things about the tour that I thought was, or I personally, but I think we all were psyched about is people were really responsive to like the first two EPs. And there's always a risk, particularly because Enjoy Yourself came out in 2020, that everybody was just gonna like ask for Enjoy Yourself songs all times. But like people were hyped on the new one, so we're pumped right now, man. We're feeling really good.
No, that's awesome. Awesome. Is there any interesting stories from that tour or anything any previous tours?
Oh God, interesting stories. I mean, I guess one of the most interesting, it's kind of like this is going to be a lame but also interesting story, is we all worked day jobs the entire tour as well. So literally every single day we would basically get up in the morning, like travel immedately and just like start working the whole time. So I think we were kind of like testing this thing out because we really want to obviously play a lot more out of California and kind of like especially on the East Coast. And so like every single day, if you were to just like get inside of our van, it's going to be like myself, Andy, Scott, or Hoda, all just like on computers doing phone calls, like trying to like do our jobs, being stressed out and stuff. So any crazy stories? I'm trying to think if there were like crazy stories from the road. Um, I mean, in Milwaukee, we specifically took our day off in Milwaukee because there's like a really iconic gay bar there that Hoda is just obsessed with. Hoda's like a huge fan of RuPaul, and there's like a really iconic drag scene in Milwaukee. So we went there and we literally just like sat in a corner and played the game Sorry, the board game Sorry the whole time. It's so sick. It was like kind of like the best case scenario is like it's a really iconic game bar. I don't remember what it's called, but there was like game night. So there was a group of people who were just playing Smash. They were playing like Smash on Wii, I guess, or Smash on the Switch. And then there were like we were playing Sorry, and everybody was just like cranking like Hams cans or like some beer, like Miller or whatever, and then just like playing Sorry. It was awesome. It was like my dream hangout.
That's awesome. Awesome.
Yeah.
So our music director Patrick here likes to call Melted Bodies a metal version of the B-52s. Have you ever heard
Cool.
that before or heard any other comparisons?
Yeah, we get that a lot. We get some version of that. Like we'll get like, oh, you guys are kind of like Devo, we're Talking Heads, but a metal version, which we always love that because we like all of us have very diverse music tastes, and we will all tell you like I love like Cannibal Corpse and Full of Hell and Sugabog or whatever as much as I love the Talking Heads or like Gilliband or I don't know, like pick a band from that ilk. So we really like that comparison because it's a pretty good reflection of what we're trying to do, and it doesn't feel like anybody's just being like, oh yeah, they're just like weird, they're like a weird band. We're just like, no, it's not that weird, it's just like we're just like a lot of different kinds of music, so we like throw it in different ways. So yeah, no, that's a big compliment. I mean, we always like to describe ourselves as like Death Meets Devo is how we sometimes talk about it, and it usually blows people's minds when we say that because they're just like, what, they can't imagine it initially.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
What's it like collaborating with such diverse musical backgrounds in the context of such a genre blending and experimental context like Melted Bodies?
I mean, it's a good question, man. I mean, I think you see it a lot in the recording process in particular. I think the way we typically work is, Andy, the lead singer, who, his background's pretty interesting. He used to be he was a founding bassist of the band Local Natives. So he's kind of toured a lot, and you know, he's got a pretty rich history in songwriting. He'll write a lot of the music as kind of like as we know it, and then we all bring it into the studio, we bring it into the rehearsal space and hear it and start like playing with pieces. Um, and then, you know, in the recording process, that's kind of where you start really seeing kind of our separate influences come together. Like I do all the synths and programming and a lot of the kind of ambient e sounds. And you know, my background, I grew up in punk and hardcore, and I'm from like a very small town on the Ohio West Virginia border, so I was kind of like AP magazine and kind of whatever they gave me, you know. But since then, as an adult, I've been like pretty active in the electronic music scene in one way or another. And so you know, you'll hear like when I personally have the time to like start thinking about how the like ancillary sounds work, I'm pulling from a lot of the things I love and a lot of the things I do with like ambient records and like synthesizers and techno and like all the stuff I do with like NTS radio. And then like Hoda, who's our bassist, you know, when we're recording, she has a very specific opinion of like how she wants the bass to sound because she's like a punk kid. She grew up in punk. So you'll hear a lot of times a little bit of the rawness of like backyard punk come through in her stuff. And Scott is a percussionist, like he's also a huge like Death Grips fan. So there's like a spasticness to the way he likes to add drum parts. So we'll record the drums as they are, but then a lot of the electronic drums that you'll hear that he did has a little bit of that like glitchy, weird, like Clark meets Death Grips and whatever. So it becomes just a little bit of like a fun playground of the things that we like and listen to and are experimenting with, which I think is part of why I think it's worked for a lot of people, you know, and even with some of our collaborators, like when we've done stuff with like Machine Girl or Shigeto or my friend Morale, it's like those are people we like. Like we listen to their music, so it makes sense when we ask Machine Girl if they want to do something. It feels kind of like we're exchanging tapes together. It's not like us hiring them to do a remix or something. It's like we clearly it works because some of those drums are the kind of stuff we use in general, you know?
Yeah, no, it's really awesome. Do you have a personal favorite song? Anything that has a special meaning or just something fun to play live?
Man, I mean, I mean, it kind of changes a little bit every day in a weird way. I mean, first of all, I have recency bias. Like a lot of the stuff that you guys have not heard yet is some of my favorite stuff, just because it's like new and fresh and weird, and we, you know, we haven't like cracked the code on how to play it yet. You know, I think when we play the Inevitable Fork live and it goes really, really well, it's like feels insane just because it's really, really heavy, but it's also like there's that really beautiful part that kind of stops. And if you can kind of, I feel like that's a good song of like crowd energy exchange. You know what I mean? We kind of get to see if they're into it or not, and you can kind of really feel it based on like how heavy parts are, and you kind of see it in the crowd if you kind of see people like moving at the right pace. Um, I think I every time we play Liars, it's always like a bit of like a puzzle for me because it's just a lot of synths going on at the same time. So like if we play it too early in the set, I'm like I like kind of am freaked out because it's just there's a lot of stuff going on. So it's like almost feels like speed running a video game. You know what I mean? Like you got to like hit everything right the first time, and like that's like a cool challenge. And
Yeah,
but yeah, I think therapy or not therapy. I mean I do like playing therapy too. It's also really really hard. I liked playing. I mean, I also really like playing our old stuff because I'm like a Hesher, so like you know we never play Meat Cleanse, and it's always a bummer because I love playing that song live because it's just like it's so brutal. But yeah, a lot of that stuff is my favorite. I don't know, man. That's a funny question because I think particularly because of the way our music is written, like every song has its own interesting challenges, and they all kind of serve a different mood, you know, like sometimes when you're like, oh, I'm feeling like the crowd is really dancey, or like we're playing with a band that's a little bit more on the kind of like funky side, then like certain songs were like really really hit. But then the flip side is like when they're not, like you kind of like really want that sludgy stuff. Like, um, yeah, I don't know. That's a great question, man. I'm gonna think about that when we leave this, like what my favorite song is.
yeah. You mentioned Liars off of Volume 1 of The Inevitable Fork. That one was
Yeah.
a hit here at WSOU.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
Awesome.
we played it a lot. I got a lot of listener requests for it. It's got such
Cool.
a catchy chorus, and it
Yeah.
introduced a lot of people, myself included, to Melted Bodies.
Oh, rad. Amazing.
Um, and I think that radio still plays a big role today, introducing people to new music. And some people argue that radio is becoming outdated due to such heavy use of streaming. Yourself being a host on
No way, man.
NTS, is there anything you have to say about today's age of radio?
Man, I love radio. Like we genuinely like once we started doing more radio stuff as a band, like I feel like it opened up like fandom. Like I think that was the thing is like Spotify certainly has its own role, but I just don't know if Spotify creates fans the way that I think radio does. There's just something about like hearing something fresh and being like, oh my God, that's so crazy. I want to hear it again, where suddenly you're like seeking it out and you just can't, you don't have that same immediate release, when you're doing radio, which then makes you crave it, and so yeah, we all love radio. We all love the role that radio has played in the band. I actually also like did a ton of college radio when I was in college. So I like discovered so many of my favorite bands from just getting demos and like getting kind of some of the promo stuff that labels will send and just like not knowing a thing, seeing the way it's described on the cover, and then just it becomes one of my favorite bands. So and I think similarly with like NTS serves a really interesting role. I mean, obviously in my life, I'm like the most devout NTS supporter in the world just because I've had a show for like 6, 7 years, but I also just believe that the intentions are really pure. Like I feel like it almost feels like an international global version of college radio where you have these people who are kind of like nerdy and into very specific parts of music that they're like eager to share, and I think that that's the thing about radio in general is particularly when you're dealing with like college radio and something like NTS, it's all about like the exchange and the sharing, right? Like I play the stuff on my show because I like want to share this stuff with people. And I think whenever somebody plays like our music, they're not playing it because someone told them to play it. They're playing it because they want to share it with the world, which is so fundamentally different than like something like Spotify where you're not, it just Spotify is more about that like I want to listen now, so I'm going to listen now. There's not really a good way to just be like, oh, I want to share this with people. That's why we're going to do it this way. I mean, even down to like the profiles on Spotify, it's like everybody can have a profile, but like I don't know about you, but I've never found a playlist from somebody and been like, oh, I follow all of their playlists now because I found their playlist on Spotify. Like it just doesn't have that same exchange, it just feels like very one-sided. So I think that more than anything is what radio does. It just feels like you're kind of in a conversation with who's playing the stuff as compared to just like passively looking on Spotify, picking a song and playing it.
You're a man of numerous creative endeavors, Melted Bodies being just one. Are there any other projects that you want to highlight?
Um, that's a cool question. Thank you. I mean, I do Melted Bodies is obviously a really big one. I mean, I've had that's a fascinating question given the tour conversation too, because that happened a couple times on tour where we would meet people and they would come up and they'd talk to me and then they'd be like, "Oh, I actually love Diamondstein," which is like my kind of experimental electronic side. And that's the name I do NTS under. And I'm always like, "Holy I can't swear on your show, right? I can't swear. Are you gonna believe it? Okay. I'm like, holy like, oh my God, this is like, I can't believe you know Diamondstein. And then we had a woman that came up in Milwaukee actually who came up and was like, "Oh, I'm actually here because I listened to your podcast about Reddit." And I'm just like, "What? Are you serious?" So, I mean, I guess the stuff I do, I think that nobody is one thing, right? Like I think everybody, like everything I get out of Melted Bodies is like it satisfies a really cool part of my life that I love, and I think that the rest of the band would say the same thing. But like, it's not it's not me, it's like a part of me. And like the same thing with what I do with NTS. Like my NTS show, for anybody who doesn't know, it's called Night Shift, and it's focused on like dark, pretty like serious, humorless music and aesthetic. It's very, very like shadowy and kind of like mist on an empty street at 3 in the morning kind of energy. And I'm not that. I'm also funny and fun and I'm into funny, but like that's also a big part of me is like knowing that I like dark music, I like dark aesthetics, I like gothy stuff, I like heavy techno and these experimental artists and cinematic artists that like have no smiles, right? And then Reddit. So I've had this podcast. We haven't been doing it in a long time. It kind of went on hiatus, but I did this podcast for several years called Did You Reddit, and it was just this other side, right? Which was like funny things you find on Reddit and then discussing the communities of Reddit, almost like journalism. So I think each of them plays kind of a role in my life that I think makes it easier to feel just like satisfied as a person, because I'm not feeling like, oh my God, I'm like everything with melted bodies. I just like there's a darkness in my soul and I need to like figure out how to get it. I don't have to do that in melted bodies because I can do that kind of with some of my other stuff. So yeah, it's interesting, man. I mean, yeah, I would say that the three that I'm most focused on typically are Diamondstein, Melted Bodies, and the Reddit stuff, though I haven't been doing that as much. But I'm really hoping this next year I put out some more Diamondstein stuff, because I've been pretty focused, obviously, on Melted Bodies, as we all have. So yeah, so look out for more Diamondstein stuff, I guess.
Awesome, that's great. And playing into pretty different environments with different crowds, DJing for an electronic crowd, and then playing with Melted Bodies for a more heavy metal crowd. Which one do you prefer?
I mean, it kind of depends on the crowd, man. I mean, there's more crossover than you realize, right? Like, I think a lot of the people that I will, I'm still kind of in this weird world where I almost have to like put an asterisk on what I do with either crowd, where I kind of go, oh yeah, I like, I do this thing with NTS, but I also have this like project about metal, but let me explain it. And I'm kind of trying to stop doing that, because I'm starting to realize that people who like will see me DJ either in person, kind of doing heavy techno and kind of like really, really industrial, like violent sounding evil music live, or NTS, which tends to be a little bit ambient. Like if I ever go, oh, I'm also in this metal band, it's like this. A lot of times people will be like, oh yeah, I listen to tons of metal, and then they start listing off bands. I kind of go, oh, there is a shared language. So I think I like playing in front of people who like, I like being in the communities and participating in communities where they can appreciate artistry as a whole and an idea. You know what I mean? Like sometimes you go to these shows, these like Melted Body shows, and you can tell they're not like just one thing as well, right? They're like a kind of a nerd who's a little bit older and they like music like this, but they used to listen to this. And you can tell that they kind of get what we're doing, which is like not meant to be one thing. We don't like being able to like be easily classified. Like certainly it helps, but I don't think it's just really the intention of the project. I mean, we want people to be able to be like, oh, I like Devo and I like Cannibal Corpse. And I think the same thing with my stuff. It's like, some of my Diamondstein releases are pretty scary sounding and others are just like really beautiful. And I do that on my NTS show. And I don't want people that are ever going to like question why I do one and the other. I kind of want people to go, oh, of course it makes sense, because we're all multifaceted people. So yeah, I mean, it depends, man. I mean, I guess going back to the original question, like, I mean, a cool crowd is a cool crowd, and a good crowd that's into it is a good crowd that's into it, right? Like, I don't think anybody wants to play in front of a crowd where they're all just like standing around and like just kind of there because they're supposed to be there, because they're like in a scene or they want to be seen or whatever. I think that, if I've played some massive, like weird techno party things as Diamondstein that are like the craziest crowds in the world, and the energy is so rich. But I've also, Melted Bodies has played rooms to like 7 people, but those 7 people, like it blows their mind and you can just tell it's fun, right? And so I think both of them have their place. But I mean, Melted Bodies shows are a special thing, man. They're like you can tell there's like a lot of love, and a lot of our like super fans are like just like us. We talk to them about the stuff we like.
Yeah. And it's always the super fans that'll really get things going in the pit that'll really up the energy for everyone else.
Totally, totally.
And I know you've got a lot on the horizon. Is there anything you can share with me as to what fans can expect from Melted Bodies in terms of new music and upcoming shows?
For sure. Yeah. We the end of the year, we've been kind of like still trying to wrap our heads around having just done the tour. And like I said, we are officially kind of mixing and finishing the full Inevitable Fork project. We did the 2 EPs, and the whole idea was always these 3 EPs that come together. We're not going to be releasing like a third EP. We're releasing the whole thing, right? So you're going to be able to hear the whole project in one. And so we're finishing that, and we're all really excited. It feels like when you hear everything together, it does feel like it's one big idea, not 3 separate things put together. And that I think is really exciting for us, and that hopefully is going to lead to some interesting shows in the summer, which we're going to start hopefully planning. I mean, we had a really cool run with Flagman. If anybody on your show is unfamiliar with Flagman, like they've become really, really good buddies of ours, and we would love to do another run of shows with them because it worked well. We love those guys. We love playing with them, and yeah, I mean that's going to be our big one, is really getting the new record out and seeing how people feel about it. And we're also doing a ton of new merch, of course. Like Andy's an amazing designer, so he's always doing new stuff. And anybody in LA, we're going to be playing a show with Sleepy Time Gorilla Museum at the Fonda, which is a pretty big venue. So that'll be in April. But yeah, keep checking us on like Instagram in particular. We're trying to get better at Facebook. We just like have always sucked at Facebook. So we're sharing all of our information on all our socials though. So if anybody wants to catch us live, that'll be the way you see.
Oh, sweet. I can't wait for that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time, Ben.
Dude, of course. Thank you.
Is there anything you'd like to end off with for the fans to hear?
I mean, just thanks, man. I mean, I think that you guys have always been really kind to us. I think when you do a band, you never know who's going to listen, if anyone. And I think particularly WSOU has been really, really sick to us over the years, and it has been really nice to us. Really liked our stuff, and we just appreciate and love all of you. So thank you for allowing for me to talk, and then hopefully you guys can all come to see us and we can come your way.